Have you ever felt your throat constrict when someone casually mentions their latest hookup? While your entire nervous system recoils because you know this shallow explanation can't explain the earthquake happening beneath your skin. You put on the expected smile, but your bones ache with the weight of understanding that what everyone calls desire is actually something far more desperate, something clawing its way up from depths they refuse to acknowledge. Your body becomes a battlefield between the socially acceptable story of lust and the raw truth pulsing in your veins, that what you crave has almost nothing to do with flesh, and everything to do with a void so profound, it makes your chest cave inward. In those moments when you catch yourself reaching for another distraction, another image, there is a split second when you feel the vertigo of recognizing that you're not seeking pleasure, but running from emptiness so vast it could swallow you whole. You're not imagining this terror that lives in the space between craving and satisfaction. You're not overreacting when every cell in your body screams that conventional wisdom about sexuality is a comfortable lie designed to avoid confronting something unbearable. You're not losing your mind when you suspect that your hunger is actually your soul hemorrhaging, desperately trying to signal that something essential has been severed. Carl Jung discovered this exact phenomenon while treating patients whose sexual obsessions crumbled under examination, revealing themselves as elaborate disguises for spiritual wounds that modern psychology didn't dare name. His revolutionary insight was that what we mistake for lust is often the psyche's most primitive attempt to repair a fracture in the very foundation of human wholeness. But what specific psychological mechanism did Jung identify that transformed soul hunger into sexual compulsion? And why does understanding it hold the key to authentic freedom? Through decades of clinical observation, Jung uncovered a profound truth about human desire that most refuse to face. What we mistake for simple physical craving reveals itself as something far deeper, something that touches the very core of our divided nature. When the mind reaches for fantasy in moments of emptiness, it signals a fundamental disconnection from the inner world. The body seeks union while the soul remains isolated, creating an endless cycle of hunger that no external satisfaction can fill. The clinical setting revealed patterns that modern psychology still struggles to understand. Patients arrived speaking of sexual problems, but their dreams told different stories. Behind every compulsive behavior lay unfinished business with childhood wounds, unprocessed grief, and abandoned parts of the personality. Jung discovered that what people called addiction was often the psyche's desperate attempt to restore balance through inappropriate means. Jung recognized that beneath every compulsive desire lies a fragment of the psyche calling out for integration. The shadow, that rejected part of ourselves, manifests through behaviors that shame us, yet continue to control our actions. We tell ourselves these urges represent weakness, but Jung saw them as misdirected attempts at psychological wholeness. The unconscious speaks through symptoms, and compulsive sexuality becomes its desperate language. In analytical psychology, the anima represents the feminine aspect within the masculine psyche. When this inner feminine remains unconscious, men lose contact with their capacity for genuine feeling and emotional depth. They project this lost inner quality onto external figures, seeking in others what they have abandoned within themselves. The resulting obsession feels like desire but functions as psychological possession. The anima carries qualities of receptivity, intuition, and emotional wisdom that complement masculine consciousness. Without access to these inner resources, men become trapped in rigid patterns of thinking and behaving. They mistake intensity for depth, conquest for intimacy, and possession for love. Dreams often reveal this dynamic through symbolic imagery of unattainable women, mysterious feminine figures, or scenarios of endless pursuit. These are not sexual fantasies, but psychological communications from the split-off anima seeking integration. The dreaming mind attempts to show what conscious awareness refuses to acknowledge. When these messages are ignored, they intensify, eventually manifesting as compulsive behaviors in waking life. What appears as attraction to another person often masks a deeper longing for reunion with split-off parts of the self. The intensity of sexual fantasy reveals the degree of inner fragmentation, rather than the strength of physical appetite. Jung observed that patients who struggled with compulsive behaviors were invariably disconnected from their emotional reality. They had learned to escape feeling through sensation, creating a prison of perpetual seeking. Modern life amplifies this disconnection through constant stimulation and digital distraction. The psyche, starved of genuine encounter with its own depths, seeks artificial intensity through increasingly extreme imagery. Each temporary satisfaction reinforces the underlying emptiness, strengthening the very pattern it promises to resolve. The mind becomes trapped in what Jung called a complex, an autonomous fragment that operates beyond conscious control. Technology has created unprecedented access to stimulating content while simultaneously isolating individuals from authentic human connection. The nervous system becomes conditioned to require ever-increasing levels of intensity just to register sensation. What once provided satisfaction no longer suffices, creating a tolerance that mirrors chemical addiction. The digital age presents unique challenges that Jung could hardly have imagined, yet his insights remain remarkably relevant. Virtual encounters replace the messy complexity of real relationships, offering the illusion of intimacy without vulnerability. The anima projection finds perfect targets in curated online personas that can embody any fantasy without the inconvenience of actual humanity. Social media algorithms become complicit in maintaining psychological fragmentation by feeding the very patterns that keep users trapped. What appears as choice becomes compulsion disguised by the illusion of unlimited options. The unconscious finds digital spaces perfectly suited to its autonomous operation, free from the constraints of physical reality. This is where transformation becomes possible, but only through conscious engagement with the shadow material. Instead of acting out the compulsion or suppressing it through willpower, Jung advocated for a third way. He taught patients to dialogue with these impulses, treating them as messengers from the unconscious rather than enemies to defeat. Through active imagination, the hidden meaning behind compulsive behavior gradually reveals itself. Jung discovered that this energy often carried information about unlived aspects of the personality seeking expression. The same fire that burned destructively in compulsive patterns could illuminate the path toward psychological wholeness when properly understood. This required developing what he called a relationship with the unconscious, treating its manifestations with respect rather than judgment. If you have recognized yourself in these patterns, subscribe and like to give strength to this channel, because understanding your psychological makeup is the first step toward genuine freedom. Ring that notification bell to stay connected with insights that can transform your relationship with your own unconscious. This knowledge has the power to shift you from being controlled by your impulses to understanding their deeper purpose. The journey toward healing begins not with fighting against these patterns, but with developing curiosity about what they might be trying to accomplish. The therapeutic process begins with radical honesty about the true nature of these cravings. When someone sits quietly with the energy of desire without immediately acting upon it, something remarkable happens. The urgent quality begins to dissolve, revealing underneath a profound loneliness that has been driving the behavior. Jung discovered that sexual compulsion often masks grief for unlived aspects of the personality. This sitting with discomfort requires tremendous courage, because it involves facing the very feelings that compulsive behavior was designed to avoid. But gradually, tolerance for psychological tension increases, creating space for new responses to emerge. The capacity to remain present with difficult emotions marks the beginning of genuine psychological development. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to eliminate desire, but to transform its quality through conscious relationship. Raw sexual energy, when met with awareness rather than compulsion, reveals its connection to life force itself. This same energy fuels creativity, spiritual longing, and the drive towards psychological wholeness when properly channeled. The fire that burns destructively in unconscious patterns becomes illuminating when brought into conscious awareness. Active imagination provides a powerful tool for engaging these energies constructively, rather than being overwhelmed by them. Through dialogue with inner figures, the autonomous complexes gradually lose their compulsive power. The anima, when approached respectfully rather than possessed desperately, begins to function as an inner guide rather than a tormentor. This relationship with the feminine principle within transforms both sexuality and creativity into conscious expressions of wholeness. Jung taught his patients to approach these inner encounters with the same respect they would show to any important relationship. The anima figure might appear in dreams or fantasy as a seductive woman, but conscious dialogue reveals her deeper role as carrier of emotional wisdom. Through patient attention to her messages, the compulsive quality of sexual desire gradually transforms into conscious appreciation for feminine qualities. Parts of the self that were rejected in childhood continue to seek expression through inappropriate channels. The boy who learned that tenderness was weakness may spend decades chasing external validation through sexual conquest. The man who never developed his capacity for intimacy mistakes intensity for connection, possession for love. These patterns repeat until consciousness intervenes through the difficult work of self-examination. Integration requires withdrawing projections from external objects and recognizing them as aspects of the inner world. The woman who seems irresistibly attractive often carries qualities that belong to the man's own undeveloped feminine side. When he reclaims these projected elements, the compulsive quality dissolves, replaced by genuine appreciation. This psychological work transforms lust from a driving force into creative energy available for authentic relationship. Jung emphasized that healing occurs not through elimination of desire, but through its conscious transformation. Sexual energy, when integrated with emotional awareness, becomes a source of vitality and creative expression. The same fire that burns destructively in compulsion can illuminate the path towards psychological wholeness. But this requires patient attention to the inner process, rather than immediate gratification of surface urges. The Red Book reveals Jung's own struggle with these forces, documenting his journey into the collective unconscious. He learned to treat psychic images as living realities deserving of respect, rather than symptoms to eliminate. Through this approach, what initially appeared as pathological became a doorway to expanded consciousness. The anima, when approached consciously, serves as guide rather than tormentor. Jung's personal encounter with his anima figure illustrates the transformative potential of conscious relationship with inner opposites. Rather than projecting this feminine wisdom onto external women, he learned to dialogue directly with this inner figure. Through years of careful attention to her messages, Jung developed his understanding of the collective unconscious and archetypal psychology. The Red Book's intricate mandalas demonstrate how sexual energy can be transformed into spiritual and creative expression. These circular symbols represent the psyche's natural tendency toward wholeness, when conscious and unconscious elements achieve balance. The same energy that drives compulsive behavior can fuel what Jung called the work against nature that creates psychological gold. Jung discovered that what appears as base material contains the seeds of the most precious psychological treasures. Recovery from compulsive patterns involves developing what Jung called a relationship with the unconscious. This means learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings without immediately seeking escape through fantasy or action. The capacity to tolerate psychological tension allows new possibilities to emerge from the depths of the psyche. Where once there was only craving, space opens for genuine choice and authentic feeling. Many discover that their deepest longing was never truly sexual but spiritual, a hunger for meaning and connection. The body's apparent demands mask the soul's need for recognition, acceptance, and integration. When these deeper needs receive conscious attention, the compulsive quality naturally diminishes. What remains is clean energy available for creative work and genuine intimacy. The confusion between sexual and spiritual longing has ancient roots in human psychology. Mystical traditions recognize this connection, often describing divine union in erotic imagery, while warning against literalizing these metaphors. Jung understood that the same archetypal energies that fuel religious experience can become trapped in purely physical expressions. The task involves recognizing the spiritual dimension within sexuality, rather than rejecting the body in favor of abstract spirituality. This integration creates what Jung called the sacred marriage between opposing aspects of the psyche. Masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, conscious and unconscious achieve dynamic balance rather than static resolution. From this inner union emerges a creativity that transcends both purely sexual and purely spiritual expressions. The individual becomes capable of relating to others from wholeness rather than neediness, presence rather than projection. Contemporary research in neuroscience validates many of Jung's insights about the relationship between compulsive behavior and emotional regulation. The same brain circuits involved in addiction also process attachment, meaning making, and social connection. Healing approaches that address only behavioral symptoms while ignoring underlying emotional and spiritual needs often fail to create lasting change. Jung's emphasis on meaning and relationship provides essential components missing from purely medical interventions. This transformation offers profound gifts beyond the resolution of problematic behavior. Those who complete this psychological work develop increased capacity for genuine relationship and creative expression. They discover inner resources that were previously unavailable, having been bound up in repetitive patterns. The same intensity that once drove compulsion now fuels purposeful action in the world. Jung's approach offers hope for anyone trapped in cycles of shame and compulsive behavior. By treating symptoms as messengers rather than enemies, consciousness can penetrate even the most stubborn patterns. The key lies in developing curiosity about the unconscious, rather than judgment toward its manifestations. Through this patient attention, what seemed like personal weakness reveals itself as a universal human struggle. The journey towards psychological integration is neither quick nor easy, but it leads to authentic freedom. Those who undertake this work discover that their apparent pathology contained seeds of their greatest potential. The very intensity that once caused suffering becomes the fuel for creative transformation and genuine intimacy. This is the promise of depth psychology. The possibility of turning our deepest struggles into sources of strength and wisdom. The individuation process requires what Jung called a religious attitude toward the unconscious, treating its manifestations with respect rather than judgment. This does not mean passive acceptance of destructive behaviors, but rather curious investigation of their deeper purpose. Every symptom carries information about unlived potentials and unmet psychological needs. The path forward involves neither indulgence nor suppression, but conscious engagement with the energy behind compulsive patterns. Cultural healing requires individuals brave enough to face their own shadows and integrate their rejected aspects. Jung believed that collective problems could only be resolved through individual psychological work. Each person who completes this inner journey contributes to the healing of the wider human community. The transformation of personal compulsion into conscious creativity serves not only individual development, but collective evolution. Those who have walked this path report profound shifts in their capacity for authentic relationship and meaningful work. The same fire that once burned as compulsion now illuminates creative projects and deepens intimate connections. Life becomes an adventure in consciousness rather than an escape from psychological pain. This transformation validates Jung's insight that our greatest wounds often conceal our most precious gifts. The legacy of Jung's work continues to offer hope for anyone struggling with the tyranny of unconscious patterns. His approach treats the human psyche with both scientific rigor and profound respect for its mysterious depths. The invitation remains open for each individual to discover the gold hidden within their psychological lead. This is the true philosopher's stone, the transformation of suffering into wisdom through conscious relationship with the depths of the soul. Modern therapeutic approaches that integrate Jung's insights report remarkable success rates with compulsive sexual behaviors. The key lies in addressing the underlying psychological fragmentation, rather than focusing solely on behavioral modification. When the deeper wounds receive attention, the compulsive symptoms often resolve naturally, as byproducts of increased wholeness. This validates Jung's conviction that symptoms serve the psyche's drive toward integration and should be respected as such. The therapeutic journey involves learning to befriend the very aspects of oneself that seem most problematic. Sexual compulsion, when approached with curiosity rather than judgment, reveals itself as misdirected life energy seeking expression. The same force that drives compulsive behavior can fuel creative projects, spiritual development, and authentic relationship. This transformation requires patience, courage, and what Jung called the religious attitude towards psychological material. Those who complete significant psychological work often feel called to support others in similar journeys. The healing they have experienced naturally extends itself through teaching, therapy, creative expression, or simply modeling conscious living. This validates Jung's insight that individual transformation serves collective evolution and gives meaning to personal struggle. The wounded healer archetype describes those who transform their own suffering into wisdom that can benefit others. Jung himself exemplified this transformation, turning his own psychological crisis into revolutionary insights that continue to heal others. His legacy reminds us that our deepest struggles often contain the seeds of our greatest contributions. This perspective transforms shame into purpose and isolation into connection with the universal human journey toward consciousness.